You guys ready to rock?
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Gal, thanks for joining us, man. I want to jump straight into this with a question to kind of set the stage for people in the traditional world versus the crypto world, and the way that I would describe you guys at Hypernative is a pre-transaction screening platform.
We are a threat intelligence and a prevention platform, or the detection and response system for digital assets, essentially risk prevention.
That's an excellent intro, but yeah. So if Gal, when we're having conversations with folks in traditional finance, that's the world that I came from personally. I think a challenge that people have a lot of times is sort of like they think like, okay, we've done sort of cybersecurity in the traditional world, cybersecurity in the traditional financial world, and it's kind of challenging sometimes for people to see the nuances, like how digital asset cybersecurity is actually like it can be quite different depending on who you ask. So it's like, what, from your perspective, you're sitting across the table from a traditional risk officer at a bank or an asset manager, and how are you thinking about explaining the key differences between traditional cybersecurity and crypto native security?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and in the end, we need to remember, right, that digital assets are a complete different tech stack that have a lot of different components, and they need the same, right? They need the same solutions, like in traditional security for like web or cloud security, but they need these solutions to be tailored into crypto or digital assets, right? So you have, for example, a wallet or an MPC or a custodian that you might be using, and that's another technology, right, that you are using to transact and hold funds. And that needs a whole access control management. That needs a whole process of how do you approve a transaction and how you make sure that you're not interacting with a malicious actor. And then you have everything that is happening on chain. And this is a misconception I sometimes hear. People think that because there is blockchain, then blockchains are secured. But in the end, blockchain are an infrastructure layer, right? That you build. On top of that, you build applications, you build smart contracts, you build tokens, you build stable coins. It's like saying, right, like I don't need cloud security because Amazon is very secured, right? So you have the infrastructure layer, which is the nodes themselves and the consensus protocol, but then you have people that are building actually code and application, and these code and applications have vulnerability just like any other code, and you need ways to really monitor these smart contracts and these transactions in real time, and you need to detect risk proactively as much as possible and then react. So just like you have a detection and response system for cloud or for your enterprise on-prem, then you also need the same capability to a blockchain or a layer 2 network. And these are exactly the tools that Hypernative is building, is essentially bringing construct that people and CISOs knows from traditional cyber and applying them to digital assets related areas. And there needs to be a very domain specific, like you can't take the tools that you're using to protect your endpoint and apply them to protecting your wallet. Everything is a bit different there.
Dalton, do you have anything to say about that? You're our cloud guy.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, as far as, a lot of trust. And I mean, for most startups, you get your big pile of AWS credits, and then now you've offloaded all of your security and they're running all your infrastructure. But then you obviously have on your application stack, all sorts of vulnerabilities that you can't ignore, whether it's like authentication, which is obviously going to be huge on the crypto side, and your payments flow and all that stuff. There's a lot more depth to your attack vectors than just infrastructure, obviously.
And so, like, when you see these traditional firms entering the space, like you did a really nice job there, like laying out, how these are kind of like similar, from almost like a metaphor perspective, blockchain and cloud. But when you see these traditional firms entering the space, do you find that there are certain areas where they're typically underestimating operational risk?
We see a lot, and I think there was a very big demonstration of that, and it's actually even not a traditional company. It's like a big exchange, Bybit, that got hacked for $1.5 billion, was stolen by a hack from North Korea, and that hack was like everything was safe in Bybit, like they weren't hacked, but actually the cloud provider that they were using was hacked, right? So thinking about these, right, like wallets, that they are not, right, like in the end, it's a technology stack that you're using, it's a third-party risks that you are getting. And when you are managing these kind of amounts, which obviously the big traditional finance, right, will manage, then you need to take care of that risk, right? Like you want an extra security that essentially knows to automate a lot of the checks and the policies that you will want to enforce that humans just can't, right? So there is a notion of MPC in the crypto space, right? You have a transaction and you need few people to approve a transaction before you send it. Now it's very similar to a bank account, right? That you have a policy and you want to approve a transaction. But when you're looking at crypto, right, or digital assets, then you really want to add on top of that another process that no matter what happens to these humans, right, even if they are compromised by their personal computers, or there is a compromise in that third party in the wallet that they are interacting, or they are making a mistake, right, or that they are getting phished and they are now sending to an address that is not the address that they intended to, right? Maybe there is something changing the front end of the application where they're trying to send funds to. So you want this automated process that knows to check all of these things and verify them and block if something goes wrong. And I think that it's much more critical than traditional finance because in crypto, once you do the transaction, it's irreversible, right? You can't complain to someone and tell them, right, give me my money back. There was a threat, and a lot of times you don't even know, right? If you lose funds to an address, it's hard to understand what is the identity of that address. And this is, by the way, opens a whole new set of problems that is not just security based, but it's also fraud based. So the entire fraud stack for crypto transaction is very, very different today from how you do fraud in traditional finance. And that, I think, as more use cases of stable coins evolve, we'll see more fusing of security and fraud and more domain specific fraud solutions to this space.
Now, how do you think about all that, like in the context of wrench attacks? Is that something you think about a lot?
I think right, like when you look at crypto or blockchains, they are a very lucrative targets, right? So from the start, it's like if I'm a bad actor, then I want to attack a bridge. I want to attack a protocol, right? Because the gain is so immediate, right? It's actually I'm stealing funds. It's not user data. It's not access, right? I'm just getting like it's the bank robbery of the of years ago. So it makes a very big target for even nationwide actors, right? Like North Korea, they basically have an infrastructure and big teams of people that are just um, essentially geared into hacking protocols, and the stakes are very, very high. So definitely when you are transacting and when you're sending funds and you're bridging across chains, then you are exposed to all sorts of risks. And the one challenge that we found that people don't really understand is that there are so like it's a multi-dimensional problem because you have so many dependencies. So a bridge has, right, like it has the on-chain part, it has the off-chain part, it has the entire way that it's operating, it has the team itself that can control the bridge, maybe it has the front end of the bridge. So and this is, by the way, this is for a bridge. And then if you have a strategy that is spanning bridges and protocols, then you have, right, like you have a lot of other risks. So being able to monitor all of these risks and really react in real time, that's essentially like what we've built in Hypernative, giving you the tool to get this visibility in real time, even before you approve a transaction, and continuously. So even if, right, like even if you did a transaction, but there is some risk change, then you can actually react potentially automatically as well. And this is something that you can't just like by human, right? Like you can't do it manually.
So for your clients, like how do they engage with Hypernative? Like what is the product like pricing structure? Like what does the entire engagement look like of like, oh, okay, I want to enable these security features. What's the onboarding look like? What does it take to protect my DApp?
So Hypernet, it's we monitor 65 plus chains today in real time. So we monitor everything anyway, regardless if you're a customer. And this is what helped us, by the way, in the last 3 years, basically see all the hacks and exploit that happen. And in 99%, we see them before they happened, a few minutes, sometimes even more. We helped countless protocols, and some of them, by the way, most of them are non-customers of Hypernative, where some of them managed to save funds. And onboarding is very simple. You get an account in the system. You essentially create your own risk plan of how you want to monitor the different kind of risk. And this is where we also help you, because there is the generic detection, but there are all sorts of risks that you might not think about that you want to monitor. And then you decide what are the different actions that you want to do based on different detections, and you configure the system. The onboarding can be as fast as a day. Sometimes it takes a week because you are creating a more advanced risk policy, but that's around it.
But as far as the actual, so this is just alerting. This isn't stopping anything or anything like this. Isn't some sort of like proxy contract that you're routing transactions through to simulate and then terminate them if they have negative side effects or anything like that.
So we know based on a detection to trigger a transaction on chain. So think about it like you are an asset manager, you are invested in a protocol. Hypernative detect 2 minutes before that there is a attack coming on that protocol, money is going to be lost. You can actually withdraw or move the funds back to your wallet or to another address before, and that's how we saved, again, hundreds of millions of dollars in the last few years.
Interesting. And so, how are the actual like the rules themselves protected? So, like once you've set up your Hypernative like risk strategy, so now that's a new almost attack surface as well. As like somebody can go in and manipulate and take those rules away. So, how is that secured?
Yeah, but that's always right. Like if your security vendor is compromised, but definitely is Hypernative. Again, we never have access to your funds, right? Like we only have access to create these emergency actions, and these emergency actions are just moving funds from your assets, right? So we never can. Hypernative never has an access to actually do damage if someone is taking like is compromising us for that matter. And obviously, as a security company, we try to be, we
secure.
we have sleepless nights of getting SOC 2 Type 2, getting all the different protection to our employees and infrastructure, and trying to be as secured as possible.
Right. So this idea of moving the assets to this sort of like safe room wallet or something like that. This is essentially like a pre-signed transaction that just says, okay, if this gets triggered, send it over here. Okay, understood.
Yeah. We are mostly like a triggering mechanism. We are not actually in possession of the funds at any point.
Understood. Very cool.
And you mentioned bridges earlier. What are some of like the categories of protocols that you think are most at risk today?
So we see many hacks on lending protocols. Obviously, as more advanced the protocol and more complex, right, like the higher the risk factors. Hypernative approach was actually not to not to necessarily detect vulnerabilities at the protocol, but actually we wanted to create a generic way to detect hacks and exploit. And the way that we are doing it is we're actually detecting bad actors before they do something bad. So it doesn't necessarily matter for us what kind of vulnerability. So the concept of what we are doing is essentially we are detecting bad actors, right? Preparing to do an attack. And this is part of the magic of Hypernative is that we don't necessarily care how are you going to manipulate, right, or hack a protocol. We are actually detecting that you are malicious in a very high precision, and then that you are targeting this specific protocol. And this method actually helped us detect even 0 days, right? Like even attacks that no one thought or saw before in a pattern that weren't, you know, visible to others. So that way, for us, it doesn't matter. Like the generic detection doesn't matter if you're a lending protocol or if you're a bridge. We are still detecting these attacks, and this proved to be very, very efficient. And just yesterday, another hack that we helped a week ago, another protocol that and there's a big list of protocols that mention us and thank us in their Twitter or in their postmortem. Not even customers that we constantly helped because of this visibility. I think what we see the shift is that actually the weakest link today is the people, the team itself. So operational security becoming the problem, right? Like people hacking the founder laptop in, right? Like just a malware, and then actually manipulating, right, the code or the protocol from the access, from the privileged access computers, and that's the weakest link today, not necessarily even the code itself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that lending markets have always kind of spooked me as far as like all the vulnerabilities with collateralization, and especially when you get into like cross lending markets, which is obviously really cool to have. But you know, you it all of those risk and vulnerabilities make these lending markets a lot less useful when you already have to be over collateralized, and now you have all these risks, and so you know it becomes maybe like a tax saving vehicle or something like that, or if you want some different exposures. But it's definitely the spookiest protocols for me as well as on the lending side.
Yeah, and you have a lot of dependencies, right? Like even if you got everything right, then a lot of times we see like misconfigured oracles or using oracles that are inaccurate. So you still have like third party basically risks, right?
How do you see like the sophistication of the attackers themselves changing over time?
Attackers, just like in any other domain, right, are looking for the easiest and simplest manner for them, right? They want to get the highest ROI, so they want to make the lowest effort and steal the biggest amount. And I think again, you're facing nation state actors here, right, that are funded quite aggressively to have KPIs and results of hacking, right? Like they are incentivized to hack, and if they are not hacking, they are being punished, right? Based on that. So you do see sophistication in this area, and it's very solidity and smart contract language, like as a code, is very prone to errors and mistakes. So I think part of the shift that we've seen are actually hacking the infrastructure, right? So it could be, as I mentioned, the founder computer itself. It could be the wallet, right? Infrastructure, like in the safe case. And I think that will just grow, right? The operational security aspects are going to grow. And today there are even like physical security issues, right? Like people kidnapping people in the industry
Right.
and threatening their. So there is actually companies that are offering bodyguard to founders and protocol leaders to protect from that area. So.
And how would you? So what's an example of how Hypernative helps a guy that gets kidnapped?
So I think we at Hypernative don't hold any funds, right? Again, it comes down to, right, like it's not, I don't have any excessive permission, right? Like everyone needs to approve a transaction. So I think if you create the right policies and you are very transparent about these policies, so
Right.
people see that it's just not worthwhile to do
Right.
anything. And if you are creating and using third parties, and again, this is where our, for example, the Guardian product, which is like a
Right.
co-signer, right? Like think about it. Even if you are holding a wallet that has, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars, but you have a third party that needs to approve every transaction and you can't change, right? Like you create this hard policy, then right, like it's double the effort to basically do
Right.
something for you, because it doesn't matter if they're compromising you, they need to compromise Hypernative as well.
Yep.
And that's what I think we are doing, and advising our customers as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Are you seeing or investors like in the VC space when they're looking at protocols? Are you seeing them like require some sort of security layer like what you provide? I would
Yeah.
imagine like it would be very important to me to make sure like because that's such a big risk that's kind of covered and checked.
Yes, that's something that evolved over time from the time that we started. So I think there was, when we started in 2022, there was no real notion of real-time security in the space. Like we created that category as Hypernative. And right now, it's like security is a big part of the due diligence process for investors. And actually, investors, by the way, not only investors, but asset managers and funds that deploy funds at protocol actually require them to use real-time security and systems. And when they are doing their due diligence, right, they care about the security measures that you are taking end to end. And yeah, I think that's a good thing, right? Because as an investor, as you said, right, like a hack or a security incident could be, right, like could be the end of
Right.
your project essentially.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah, and it seems like what you're offering is very easy to like integrate and set up, and why not do it when you
yes.
have. And it's always surprising to me. I'm sure Phil, I'm sure you as well, to find out. Oh wait, the founder had the keys to these wallets the whole time. Like that's just like it wouldn't make sense to me if you were at any other business. Like if and to find out like oh no, everybody just has access to the company bank account and they're just spending it however they want to. Like there's protocols. You got your CFO in place. You got somebody watching all this money, and you've got external auditors and all that kind of stuff. But it's not been caught up in the crypto space where you mentioned before with the kidnapping example of if it's just one guy that has access to this stuff and he just has to have a bad day or he just has to get put in a place where he uses those funds how we shouldn't be using it, and you could really mess up an entire enterprise. Whereas just a couple of small steps in between to slow things down is really all you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And again, I think it's a mindset shift, right? Right, like the industry is coming to a mindset change, right? As more institutionals are entering, that security is a very critical component. It needs to be very, very early in the process. And I think scams and phishing and big, right, like things are happening also in, by the way, in traditional enterprise
Right.
or finance. We just don't hear about them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot
At a
of,
much larger scale.
yeah, I think it attributes also to that everything is open, right, in crypto, right? So everyone see, you can't really hide it. So
Right.
when something happens, everyone sees about it. which is some of maybe the good things also about the space, right? The transparency and the ability to see things, and I think this transparency is what led us to create Hypernative, because what we achieved in that space, we probably couldn't achieve in any other space. Being able to detect 99% of the attacks before they happen, that's that's very, very hard to do in other industries. And we did it here because we saw everything, right? We saw everything.
Right.
We saw everything historically. We could create models that act very accurately based on that.
Right. Yeah, my wife works at a bank, and they have all these fraud prevention systems and all these alerts, and she works with high net worth, so she's having to call them. Hey, did you do this? It triggered some sort of flag in our system, and now your account's frozen. And it's you're certainly not catching 99% of them. And it's kind of just hopefully someone's looking out for you, and something gets flagged because it's a very strange transaction. But with all the on-chain stuff, like there's some pretty easy to recognize well, not easy to, but there's repeatable patterns that you can recognize to hopefully prevent things from going forward. And then I think as far as like being more observable and being able to actually see things on chain, I think it does get people a lot more interested in, like more do-it-yourself kind of detective work of being able to follow and educate themselves on what happened, and a lot more interesting write-ups on how that sort of thing happens as well for me to follow and to read the step-by-step on all the transactions involved.
Yeah, definitely. And I have a dream that, right, like this space can actually make our life safer. It doesn't look like it now, but I think going forward, it will enable more fraud and security providers to offer solutions that are actually better than traditional finance fraud.
Right.
And on that note, like, what about stablecoin issuers? What are some of like the risks that you foresee with these guys?
I think from a purely technical security aspects, because there are other type of risks, but from that, right, like you have the same security. You are deploying smart contracts, right? Like you want to monitor them, you want to react. I think for them, the fraud component is a big problem, and this is why Hypernative also has solutions there, because the way that we found it is that the current like fraud solutions in the space are basically a compliance providers, and in order to prevent fraud proactively before you approve a transaction, you really need to start classifying and be able to detect bad actors before a user report about them. Because when a user report, it usually like a weeks or a month after something bad has happened, and after a lot of people lost their funds. So being able to really understand the same patterns that, right, like traditional vendors in like the credit card, right, transaction area that you mentioned are identifying, that's something that is very valuable in that space, especially since it's very easy to create a scam, right? It's very easy to spin up a new wallet. It's irreversible, so you can't really use signals that are happening after the transaction is sent. So it's a harder problem, and it's easier for the bad actor to do, and we're trying to even up the equation there.
But like with a fraud transaction, how do you think it makes sense for the stablecoin issuer, like, to go about implementing that control? Because I guess I'm thinking about it. It's like, okay, so the stablecoin issuer, it's like they launch their contract. Maybe they have some sort of like a requirement in that contract, like when a user tries to transfer the token, like this has to get like approval from some parent contract or something like this, which is controlled by the issuer themselves, or like the issuer, just like if you're going to transfer it, like I don't know, you have to use some kind of like proprietary wallet or proprietary UI or whatever that might be to do it. Like, how do you think about like the like most effective ways to like implement those kind of controls?
So I think the issuer, right, like is less of a problem for them, because usually it's the one that's processing the stablecoin, accepting or sending, right, withdrawing, or and then again you can think who is responsible to do this fraud check. I think from an issuer point of view, it's a lot about also being able to monitor the different chains, right, and the different protocols that these stablecoins are being used. Because, right, like if a chain is weak and it's hackable, and you are allowing people to mint stablecoin on that chain, right, like you can potentially affect your entire, right, the other participants that are indirectly related. So being able to monitor everything that is happening on chain is important. I also think from regulation point of view, right, like you also want to monitor all the different participants that are accessing or holding that stablecoin to understand that it's not being used for any illicit or malicious activity, both from a compliance perspective and also from, right, like probably the right thing to try and do. And these are the areas that we mostly work with stablecoin issuers around.
Do you have any worries that implementing more security practices, more protocols for protecting things, like eventually we're just going to end up in the same place as we are with like the current financial system of like, you know, all the benefits that we had of these digital blockchain rails are now kind of less and less useful because we've created all of these stops and securities and gaps in between that slow things down. And so now real time is not possible because we have all of these things in between, and like it's not permissionless anymore. And so all the things that, you know, the crypto purists might have been interested in and no longer a feature of the system.
It's a good question. I don't think so, because I think the security itself is not the issue. It's the intermediaries, right? Like you have all sorts of different organizations, no common standard or programmable standard. Each has their own security construct. So when each apply these same contracts all the way, that the money flows, and right, digital assets and crypto basically solve that, right? Like it's creating a common infrastructure there that is fully programmable, where people can build this security construct and these financial applications on top of that. And I think security by itself is right. There is always a balance, right? There is always a balance between total flexibility and security, but I think they can live pretty well without diminishing, right, like the advantages that stablecoin, for example, are bringing. As long as you have a common standard, you can actually, right, allow people to build in a common way and build it much faster than they have to, right, like integrate with any different systems and different bank in the middle and so on.
Yep, that makes sense.
And what about Bitcoin? Bitcoin treasuries are kind of a hot topic right now.
Yes. A lot of enterprises are exposing themselves to Bitcoin or other digital asset treasuries. Um, I think it's a smart move, if you ask me, as a big enterprise to diversify. Like it's right, like it's risk diversification in the end, and I think it makes sense, and I think it will grow. For us, it's less, right, like because these organizations usually do it with the third party, so we are usually working with that third party anyway. So they're just holding, right, like they're not really transacting that much with that. But I think as more and more like applications will be built, right, they will want to get yield, so they will want to hold it, but then they will also want to maybe stake it, right, and open themselves to more functions, and then they will need to mitigate the risk, and then, right, like using a system like Hypernative becomes a need for them.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So how did you get involved? I don't know if we talked about this yet, but we heard about Hypernative, why you started Hypernative, but before that, like how did you get involved in the crypto space at all?
So my background is in cloud infrastructure, like
Okay.
you, and security. And my co-founder, which I know for 15 years now, really always liked the board between financial and cybersecurity, and he is the one that actually got me into the space. And to me, it always reminds me as open source, which is something I always liked from the cloud space. It's more of a community building. Um, and we just thought that this is going to be the future of finance, and we just thought that there are a lot of things and layers to be built on top of this new finance layer, and the security problem was very, I think, transparent, right? There was a bridge hack. You mentioned bridge hack. So one of the things that really led us to jump on it was that there was a $500 million Axie Infinity hack
Right.
that people didn't notice for a few days, right? So
Right.
$500 million being stolen and no one are noticing it. That really, right, like there is a problem here, and we want
Right.
to solve that problem.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
What was it in particular that made you think that crypto be the future of finance? If you have any examples.
Yeah, I think stablecoin, like and again, right, like today we see it. Stablecoins make a lot of sense in many different use cases. There is a reason why Stripe bought Bridge for $1 billion, right? Because the volume of crypto payments today are constantly increasing, and to be honest, to me, I think a lot of organization, right, like feel that it will actually suppress traditional payments. It will take time, right? Like we see it that now there is a new regulation in the US, and right, like and there were some incidents that set back everything, like FTX and Celsius and so on. But in the end, having right, like building a financial application is hard today, and having that common infrastructure is something that is very, very valuable. And I see it also on the personal level, right? Like opening a bank account for me at a different country, that's that's not an easy task for me. And money should be global, right? We own it, we work for it. We shouldn't be having so much trouble in transferring it and moving it, and building applications on top of it. And I think digital assets open these possibilities.
So you all just raised around was it 40 million
Yes,
USD? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about the future of payments and future of crypto. What's the future of Hypernative? How do you allocate $40 million? What's the plan for functionality? What's the roadmap looking like? It's a lot of money.
Yeah, but we are trying to make Hypernative the end-to-end solution for your entire journey when you're dealing with digital assets, right? So we started with the detection and response system, be able to monitor everything that's happening on-chain, detect risk, react to risk. Now we are expanding and we are creating this product that helps you protect your wallet and be able to apply policy and block transaction before you approve them.
Okay.
And then we are also helping you screen and the counterparty, right, that you are interacting with to prevent fraud. So essentially, we are helping you protect what you deploy or hold on chain. We're helping you protect the wallet that you're transacting and holding funds, and we are helping you screen and understand who you're interacting with and what are the risks with that entity. And that covers basically, right, like your life cycle when you're dealing with digital assets, no matter if you're financial institutions, if you're building a chain or application, if you're a treasury manager, or if you're an exchange. And we are going to expand in these domains.
Right. When you talk about this sort of like blacklisting or screening process on the counterparty you're interacting with, is that something you would manage at Hypernative, like a centralized list, or does each person have their own sort of screened blacklist? generated.
So the idea of screen is basically leverage hypernative detection, right? Like the on-chain detection to classify an address as malicious, right?
I
So
see.
basically detecting you're creating a scam network because just like we are detecting hacks before they
Right.
happen, we are detecting a bad actor that is preparing to do an investment fraud on your personal wallet. And then when you're trying to interact with that wallet, we will give you all the findings that we found. So you will be able to at least investigate before
Right.
you send funds to that address.
I see. And are you all working with existing wallet providers, or are you creating your own?
We are integrating. We are integrating
Okay.
with wallet providers, institutional wallets, and so on.
Very cool. What about working with like existing regulators you mentioned like the U.S. new regulations and laws? Are you working with existing regulators to help them refine and understand? One issue that Phil and I have is that sometimes when you're reading these, especially years ago, they've gotten better now, is that it doesn't look like it was written in partner with anybody that knew what was going on in the space, right? There's a lot of, this is how it works in credit card processing, and we want to copy those rules over, and that's the new law for crypto. But
Yes.
it's not the same as you mentioned before. It's like there's a lot of different risks, there's a lot of different vulnerabilities, there's a lot more, there's some advantages, some disadvantages. So just curious if you or your team are working with, like I said, existing regulators on bringing that legislation forward that works well for everybody.
Yeah, I think we are continuously trying to educate, right, everyone that we can, because we are out there, right? Like we are seeing what is happening, we are detecting, we are helping people that are affected on a daily manner, and so we're definitely trying to educate, right, and share what we are learning with everyone because in the end we are all in the same industry and we care about that industry, not even from an hypernative just perspective, right, because we want to see it grow. So yeah,
Right.
definitely regulators, customers, new entrants to the fields.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that because we don't hear as many. We hear a lot of maybe like protocol teams or like large investment firms that are talking with regulators, but less on the actual security practitioners.
Yeah, no, we're trying, right? Like we're trying to make it visible for them what is also possible, right? Because when they're
Right.
doing regulation, they should require the things that are possible. Because again, preventing the money that is being lost is possible. I think we proved it already at Hypernative, and now
Right.
it's right setting the priorities and understanding what is actually possible in that space and at least getting that visibility, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, existing card processors or any banks, they have to enforce certain fraud management tactics and things like that. And it would make sense that that needs to be applied elsewhere, depending on the protocol or the system.
So, outside of if we step outside of like security for a second and look at the industry more broadly, what are some of the things that you're most excited about from like this point in time?
So I think again, stablecoin I think opens a huge opportunity, and we do see actually them being used in production for solving concrete use cases. So that's nice to see. Tokenization, right? Being able to tokenize different kind of real world assets and putting them on chain and building applications on top of that. That's another thing. I do also think there are a lot of complements, and this relates to stablecoins when it comes to AI and AI agents, where how you can make them right, like AI agents payments and the intersection there. It's still new, so that's right, like that's more innovation right now. But mostly stablecoin tokenization, these are the areas that we think we'll see more adoption worldwide.
No degen DeFi stuff?
Yeah, that will always that will always exist, and that's also part, right, like of the industry. But I think it's right. It's shifting into we're trying to solve something, right, that makes sense to people to use, and we're trying to create a mass adoption of that, like of that category, and what are the things that make most sense to create that mass adoption. And Hypernative is there for everyone, even if you're building a DGen DeFi protocol, but also if you're doing stable coins. So I think everyone needs protection, and we are trying to give that to them.
Nice, nice. Well, I mean, I think uh, earlier you mentioned like $2 billion in um, like potential threats that you guys have kind of participated in thwarting. When you're, I mean, that's a pretty big number. When you're calculating 2 billion, like how are you like actually calculating that number?
Yeah, so that's actually like a subset of the number, because that's actually just related to hex and exploit, and the way that we are calculating it is by, right, like the money that could have been stolen based on an alert from Hypernative, or either, by the way, for customers or non-customers that we have alerted to you, or we triggered an automated action that actually saved the funds for you. Then that's to us being calculated as funds, right, saved, because, right, if we wouldn't do this action, they would probably be stolen. So
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Well, excellent. Gal, what other thoughts do you have? I feel like that was a pretty thorough walkthrough. Is there anything else on your mind?
no, I'm happy that you're bringing this awareness to everyone, and recording this podcast. And yeah, I enjoyed. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, awesome. Well, Gal, yeah, no, thanks for making the time.
Yeah, before you go, is there anything you're like really looking forward to, like coming up regulation wise or anything like that? Any tech developments that are really exciting you, whether it's hypernative related or uncrypto related at all? Like what's got you kind of looking forward to the future here?
I think we are in a super exciting time, right? Like today with AI and everything that is coming with crypto, like our entire industries are changing right now in so many ways, right? In so many areas. And like the time for innovation and reinventing like processes and ways that people are building and creating value, it's a great, I think it's a great time from a technology point of view. And I'm really excited about the possibilities of, again, what we are building in digital asset, in crypto in
Right.
general, and how that can affect this very highly automated world that can now leverage, right, a programmable layer. So yeah, it's great. It's great time to be alive.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Well, we'll close it out on that high note. Gal, if you could stick around while it finishes uploading here. So let me click